going to join us. My apologies for keeping you waiting so long. To give a little bit of a background of how I met Manet, he has developed a new RFID poker technology. I'll let you describe it a little bit, maybe give a little bit of your background as far as how you got into the space.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Maanit. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. But yeah, just a little bit about me. I don't think many people out there watching this would really know who I am in the community, but basically I kind of got into playing poker at a young age. Kind of found this need for a better RFID solution as I kind of went through college, studied a lot of computer science, studied software security. And I think from the beginning, our focus was never really how can we build a better or more secure solution. It was basically how can we take the current solutions and make a better poker table, one that tracks chips, that tracks cards, and allow players to kind of get that data, card rooms to get that data and actually improve their game, improve their operations in obviously a more secure way. And kind of growing up with technology, you kind of see how outdated a lot of systems are today and how we kind of want to take that and take it to the next level. So my goal is to basically just take RFID technology and use that in poker and kind of help the game grow. And yeah, so I'm here.
Yeah, I think that that's really good. Mainly because I want everybody to understand that in order to get to the point of creating what you have to have a pretty intimate understanding of this tech. And, you know, as somebody whose background is computer science, and for what it's worth, I'm very far removed. I haven't programmed in almost 20 years. So I don't even know what the current languages are that are most commonly used or anything of that nature. But I have really forced myself to educate or become educated on the leading tech whenever it comes to the poker industry as a whole. And, you know, I have a working relationship with Andrew Milner, who created the original Poker GFX product. He's helped me understand the back end a lot better there. You know, also to clarify a few things that I maybe spoke a little bit out of pocket with yesterday, in having a back and forth with him, he has removed that feature on Poker GFX that used to allow you to broadcast out in real time while running the delay. He basically said that the upside of allowing production houses to do that did not outweigh the downside of the potential security breach. So he is conscientious of the vulnerabilities out there, as I'm sure you are. What I found to be most interesting about your product was the data collection element of it. As poker players in this industry who have kind of evolved through the online launching of poker gaming, I believe that we've done a very good job of becoming data analysts over the aggregate, and we've caught a lot of cheating this way. So could you speak a little bit to the aspect of the data collection element of your product and how that could potentially help secure some of these vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is from the beginning, we've kind of always looked at the data to be the main value that we provide. And that's mainly because, I mean, when I first saw GFX, and I think what Andrew's done and what GFX has done is great for the game. They've spent the last 10 years kind of providing live streaming tables to places and making it more accessible. So I think they've done kind of a great job on that. But to me, when I first saw their system, I thought, hey, why isn't this data being used to help kind of figure out more things for the card room in terms of security? Why is it not being used for the players where they can go back and see their information and see what were my leaks in my game, what's my VPIP, and kind of accessing all that data. Maybe you don't need the cameras for that, but that's a possibility. And when we first kind of looked into that, I said the big problem is the RFID chips, right? They don't use RFID chips. You have to manually type in the bets. And that means you have someone sitting in a room in the back typing that in for a live stream. And it also reduces the ability to have a very accessible solution for people in their homes or smaller card rooms that can't afford such a big setup in a room and everything like that. So I wanted to kind of make a setup that had the ability to track the data, but focus on the security side of it and focus on helping players improve their game and card rooms improve their operations. Because I think overall, data has a pretty bad connotation in our world today, right? People think of data as like, oh, I'm being tracked, or oh, the information is being stored somewhere else by someone else and can be accessed by someone else. And that's also caused a lot of the issues we're seeing with this whole scandal today. The fact that it's on an RFID table is causing people to think cheating could exist, and that would be very unlikely if this was just done on a normal table, right? So I think that's something that's important to note, that when we look at data, we're not looking in terms of how can it be used in a malicious way, but we're looking at how can we make the most secure solution possible and have a net positive result on the players and on the card rooms.
Yeah, I think that that's a great explanation. That's personally where I see it serving the biggest benefit. Obviously, it's helpful to players to be able to go back and study and all that stuff, but I've always made pretty strong arguments for why that's kind of bad for the game health as a whole. Like there was a big uproar that WSOP.com doesn't allow you to access your hand histories in bulk and upload to things like PT4 and HEM. And I was kind of always on their side, because though it does help suss out cheating, they're regulated, and I think we have to entrust that that's happening behind the scenes on their security side with gaming and all those other things. And curbing any mass data analysis, like MDA to me is very sketch. That's a whole separate conversation that we don't need to have now. But the amount of MDA that's taking place online, I think, is hurtful to the overall ecosystem. And I have certain hesitations with that becoming the case also in live. But live is so slow. right? The amount of data that you're able to collect as an individual to learn off of, to build strategies and things of that nature, it's very not sufficient and not much more than you would get off the eye test anyway, right? Like me watching 10 hours of you playing poker is probably going to hold more weight because of the actual context that I get to arrive at by seeing the actions prior to you acting or whatever the case may be, rather than just like a black and white hand history where you are cold calling a 3-bet or something of that nature. I don't get the context of game flow. So because of that, now I kind of am all in on the security side, because that's where we are fundamentally flawed, in my opinion, in the live realm. And I think now that argument for players can police a lot better if this data is public and if this data is available to be sourced. That's a really strong argument, because there isn't a gaming commission overlooking these streams. There isn't a third party. We're trusting the stream houses themselves. And though I do have a reasonably high amount of trust for the people who run these stream houses, they're not exactly incentivized to catch cheating, right? It's kind of bad for the brand, so to speak. So I kind of wanted to lead this interview then into first and foremost discussing some of the leading theories out there. Your blog post that you put out today I thought was very well written and kind of dives into some of those. So put out today I thought was very well written and kind of dives into some of those. So I just want to pick your brain and we can nerd out a little bit as far as like why technically some of these are very low to zero probabilities, and then maybe give a little credence to the ones that could be a little bit more feasible.
Yeah, I think all that's a good point. I think in terms of security, and I talked to you about this before, but what I really liked is you guys talked about this, I think yesterday, day before yesterday on the podcast, about how when GFX was first designed, right? And they've kind of, like I said, they've done a great job to kind of put this out there, but when they were first designed, it was meant to not be a commercial solution, and it was a plug and play solution that you can just put in any card room and just have working. They didn't think that there'd be a $100,000 plus game going on in a casino with the software 10, 15 years down the line, right? I think that's something that's important to note, because when you're talking about a system that can kind of look at all these vulnerabilities and kind of see how can we close every gap, I don't think that should be left to the card room. I think that's the main issue, by like having the card room worry about if the network is completely secure or if the cards were registered correctly, and all those kind of variables. The more you add, the less likely they're going to be able to do something successfully, right? And I've gone and visited a bunch of these card rooms over the last few months, years. A lot of them let me go into the back room and see how they function, how they're running, and every single card room runs differently with the software. So I think that designing a system where you think about integration from the beginning, and I kind of think of it as if you were to build a parallel to personal computing, right? It's the same way how a Windows system, which is plug and play, can have so many more viruses and vulnerabilities than, say, like a MacBook or an Apple system.
Yeah, I think that analogy is perfect, right? We wouldn't start selling personal computers and expect the user to make them secure, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I guess at first we did. We expected them to buy third-party software like McAfee antivirus and things of that nature, but it's evolved and it's got better, and we're kind of at that point now here too, where we should take some of this onus off of the card houses and just look into being the more sophisticated or developing something more sophisticated on the hardware software side. Because the fact of the matter is, the people who are starting these streams and running these businesses, they're not privy to software. They're not educated in that realm, right? They're either going to be specialized in production or in poker management or marketing or something of that realm, but it's going to have very little to do with actually comprehending the tech at play. So let's discuss a few of the leading theories, because I think my initial focus was to figure out if there was anything nefarious happening and then circle back to the how. But what I'm realizing is that hand is so standalone off that there's almost no point in trying to figure out if anything else adds up to something nefarious. It's like that hand as in isolation is almost like a smoking gun in and of itself. And figuring out the how is actually a lot more pertinent now, because if we can start to dismiss ways that they did not cheat, then we can at least hone in on potential opportunities or vulnerabilities that they could have taken advantage of, or just begin to dismiss it altogether and say, like, look, this person lost their mind in a hand with Jack 4 high, happened to be right, and won a massive life-changing pot. So the theories as I have them laid out, the first one that I think is getting the most traction is that she was able to, or a partner of some sort who was signaling her was able to infiltrate the RFID system, right? So in order, can we speak first and foremost about the idea of her just bringing in a third-party RFID reader?
Yeah, so that's something I talked a little bit about in the article, because that's probably the main thesis I've kind of seen everyone on social media come out with, because that just seems like, if you don't know much about the system, that seems like the first way you think of, right? It's something to do with the hardware and something she brought in and put there, like Ocean's 11 style, right? So I think that that seems to be, to me, one of the most unlikely situations if there is even cheating going on. I think that having a device to first of all read these RFID cards needs to be pretty strong, and for that you need a lot of power, right? So you can obviously read something from close by. I was talking to Joey Ingram about this, but he was saying like the water bottle, right? And I think the water bottle is something that's close to her own cards. It can definitely read it if you were able to design a RFID system that was exact shape, and even to get those parts, it's a huge hassle, but I'm sure she could figure out some way if she wanted to cheat. But even if you have that system, being able to read the cards next to her is possible, but reading across the table or to, even if she was supposed to target a specific opponent, I think those kind of things are very difficult to do with a system like that, unless you set up something right next to it. It would be pretty obvious and it'd be plugged into some power source. So
yeah,
I don't think that's likely.
Okay, so digging into that a little bit more, there are a few things that I want to dispel. So first and foremost, what is the actual readability range of the cards? So say she wants to read Garrett's cards. Is that even feasible being 6 feet away?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on the manufacturers of the cards. So the protocol these RFID cards are used are called vicinity cards. And the ones I've kind of examined being used, like the Faded Spades cards, shout out sponsor Faded Spade, but those kind of cards usually end up having a read range of about, I'd say 5 to 10 centimeters. So she wouldn't really be able to read Garrett's cards. And that's kind of with a caveat, because if you have this read strength isn't really dependent that much on the card itself. It's more on the readers and the antennas inside the table. If you played on one of these live streaming tables, you notice with the antennas that they have, you'd have to like rub the cards a lot or make sure that it's read. So you have to be extremely close, within a couple centimeters to read it. But if someone came from outside with a massive reader using the exact same protocol, which is very hard to build, it's technically possible, but I don't think that's the best way to do it. I don't think it's likely, and I don't think it would go unnoticed.
Yeah, I can confirm, just knowing Tom well and also having spoke with Andrew, that the Faded Spade cards are about 8 to 10 centimeters in range. Yeah. I just wanted you to kind of speak on that. Secondarily, when reading these cards, so let's say that she was theoretically able to get an RFID reader in there of some sort. Can you speak a little bit to the registration process and compiling the actual database? Because I'll let you speak on it technically, and then I'll try to translate it. But specifically what I'm talking about is the UID of each card and how that works.
Yeah, so I think that's a major vulnerability in these kind of systems. So essentially the way it works is when you scan one of these RFID cards, and you can even do it with your phone if you just download an app like NFC tool, you can just scan the card and you can get a serial number there that shows the serial number for that specific tag. And the way that essentially works is, or at least the way I'm guessing now, we don't build the systems that Hustler uses, so I don't want to talk for them. But essentially the way that it's always been is the serial numbers would be tied to a card that is kind of mentioned when you register it. So before the game, when you get a deck of cards, the production team will go there and they'll scan each card one by one and store, okay, this is the Ace of Spades, this is the Two of Spades, and the system will store in the back end showing each serial number and what card that represents, right? I think that's a big vulnerability, because if I register the cards once and play 10 games with that, and say someone got their hands on the cards after game 1, they'll know the information at game 10, right? So it should be a necessity in the software to keep changing these values and serial numbers. That's why when we design our cards, we don't build it like that. But I think that's an important thing to notice.
Yeah, so to put that into lay terms, basically each card has a unique ID to it, and if you did have an RFID reader, you'd be able to capture that unique ID. There's nothing encrypting it, right? It's open source for everybody. What matters though is these cards have to be registered to the readers at the table in order for them to produce graphics out, right? So you actually have to then translate that unique ID into a visual graphic or into English if you're cheating, right? So. Yeah. Basically, what it would take would be a plant coming in with an RFID reader, scanning the entire deck throughout the course of a session. So every time they're dealt 2 cards, they scan them. And then after the fact, go home, watch the entire stream, and every single time that they're dealt a hand, then connect that unique ID that they scanned in real time to it and create this database. Now, the easy way to avoid this is to always swap out your decks, right?
So if they were not swapping out the decks, theoretically, could the water bottle have been scanning the cards that's throughout the past sessions?
Right. That's kind of one of the leading theories. Yeah. I'll let you discuss.
It's so unlikely that. Oh, sorry. I was going to say it's so unlikely that they would just use one deck through 3 sessions.
Well, it's 2 decks.
Or 2 decks.
Right. I actually have information that might not be as unlikely as you think.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would just think that they would like. I know like when we do it, we have like 3 or 4 decks and we're just doing the academy, and then we have like, like if you're doing a stream, you would almost like register them. Re-register a different deck before each session, just to make sure that they're all
sure. But the whole point is that like negligence could occur.
Yes, of course.
Also, cards get swapped out like throughout time.
Yeah, but that's also another theory that's taking place now with the 4 and the 6 getting swapped out. That if they had a database compiled, they would only see that she had the Jack of Clubs there.
Yeah, and the reason they get swapped out is because
they
break, right? So the reader inside breaks, and then you have to swap it out.
Good.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to the first point I was trying to make, right? Where if having the card room swap out the decks and stuff like that shouldn't be on the card. Like, it's not like Ryan Feldman or Nick Vertucci, they're experts in this kind of thing, and they know that, hey, I should swap it out after every game, and I should have 100 decks lined up. I mean, each of these decks right now are costing $50 to $100, sometimes $150. So having that is not really a feasible solution, but it is the right thing to do, right? And I think that's just something in the design of the system that is an issue.
Is it feasible though for the water bottle to have been scanning? By the way, I'm going to dismiss this afterwards, but I'm just kind of asking the feasibility of it.
It is, but only probably the cards next to the water bottle. So only her cards. It won't be. It could be used to kind of collect the data, and every time she gets 2 cards, say, okay, here are the 2 cards I got. Here's the IDs for each of them. That's definitely possible, but that wouldn't help her in the Jack 4 situation, knowing what Garrett had, because it wouldn't be able to read all the way across the table.
Right. So effectively, if she were doing that, like let's say her first stream where we initially saw the bottle, she could have been data collecting the decks, then building up the registry, and then having a compilation of said registry moving forward. But to Manet's point, now the water bottle has no purpose for us in this session.
You'd almost need somebody else on the other side.
Well, that's what would be happening. She would be getting communicated to via some earpiece or device or buzz or whatever the case may be, right? That's how the system would ultimately fix. I'm pointing this out because I want people to understand how many hoops you have to jump through in order to do this. And now that we kind of speak about this, well, I actually want to hold off on that for 1 second. So just to talk about then the bottle still being on the table, either it would only be for consistency's sake because now there's nothing in it, and if people ask to check it, like you could clearly demonstrate that there's nothing in it, or it was in case they swapped out cards so that she could then capture the new cards, and somebody watching at home on a 2-hour delay would eventually be able to put them in. I don't think there's a lot of weight to either of these theories. I've spoken about it at length talking with Manet. Now, it's just a whole lot, right? It's a lot of work and a lot of prep and a lot of planning that could lead to, I would assume, a better spot than the Jack 4.
Yeah.
Another one of the theories... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that everyone on social media is kind of focused on these 2 aspects of, first of all, how did she get the information about the cards, either through the water bottle or by scanning it? It's pretty easy to do either way. And then the second thing they're focusing on is how did she kind of get that information in real time, right? Either through the thing in her pocket or something. And I think those are really the easy parts of figuring out the situation here, right? You could set, I mentioned this in the piece as well, but you can kind of set up a visual signal somewhere, just putting a light. I know their room's surrounded by glass. You put a light somewhere that kind of just flashes every time, or have some kind of, any kind of signal to her is pretty easy to set up. Yeah. The hard part, the part that I think everyone should be kind of focused on if you were to think about the situation, is how can you access and know what Garrett had at that moment, and also where's the vulnerability there, right? Yes,
that I wholeheartedly agree with. I think we've come to the conclusion that if she's cheating, the signaling aspect would not be difficult. It's the perfect information. Somehow acquiring the perfect information, finding a vulnerability in the system in some capacity. We'll kind of speak about this with the final leading theory. But before I do that, I want to dismiss another technical theory that is one that's getting passed along. So there's been this video that surfaced 4 or 5 years ago. It was very popular during the Postle scandal. And it basically gets misconstrued for RFID technology a lot. I'm not sure if you're aware of the one I'm talking about, but it's the infrared. Yeah. So just to set this up, and I'll let you speak about it a little more in depth, but this Frenchman did like a TED Talk sort of video where he demonstrates this deck of cards. And what it is you can buy an already marked deck of cards with infrared, and they're marked like on the spine of the cards, if you will. So when the deck is facing in any one of the 4 directions, those spines will have the infrared codes on them. And what the person who's cheating then does is basically has some sort of reading device that shines an infrared laser on the deck of cards, gets back perfect information as far as like how the deck is set top to bottom, and then gets a readout however they so choose. So I think that there was multiple ways that you could program it. It could either tell you like what the next card was, it could tell you the deck 1 through 52, or it could tell you by seat who is going to get out a winner, second best, third best, etc. So there was sophistication there in how you could cheat, but the few things that you need to understand is that it requires getting a pre-marked deck, which in this instance would require you getting a very custom deck because they're faded spade cards with Hustler branding on it. Somehow you would have to get that custom deck turned into a marked infrared deck. It requires the infrared device, which as of that video required a ton of power, as you were kind of speaking. So you could get multiple batteries, but they were only good for like 30 minutes. So somehow you would have to have like 10 batteries on you, constantly leaving the table to change the batteries in your device. And then finally, not only would you have to get this marked deck in, but you would somehow have to get it registered by the house as a legitimate deck. So this almost certainly would require an inside person. Can you speak a little bit to this tech?
Yeah, so I mean, we haven't worked much with infrared in terms of cards. I know the way they kind of originated was in chips in casinos. They used to mark the chips inside with infrared, or some kind of ultraviolet. So if it was stolen, you could break open the chip, look at a light, and see if it's real or not, or see which casino it's from. So that's kind of how it originated. And the video I think you're talking about, in that they kind of shuffle the cards, and immediately on the phone you get a voice saying what the order of the cards are going to come out in.
Correct.
I think it's a little bit of a stretch because that doesn't really show all the setup required to show the camera looking at it. It has to be at a pretty good angle to see every single card in the deck while it's being shuffled. It has to be extremely accurate and positioned to know the exact layering of the cards without, I mean, a single mistake could make the cheater lose as much money as they win, right? So it has to be extremely accurate, and I can probably name 10 better ways to kind of access that data than using infrared. And also, I don't even know if the cards that they get even have infrared marked on. I don't know why they would do that. I don't know any systems that use that.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. There's another theory that's going around. It's revolving around Rip's watch. So it's a very, very expensive watch. It's a Bubba Watson. Can't recall the full name.
Richard Mille.
Richard Mille, yeah. Apparently there's only like 5,000 of them made. Very expensive watch, like $500,000, something of that effect. But there's a lot of people on the internet supposing that it's actually a fraud and housing a RFID reader of some sort. Can you talk a little bit about, so we've already discussed this, but on top of that theory, there's this notion of repeaters and UHF, UHF being ultra high frequency. Can you speak a little bit about those and how they could potentially be worked into this?
Yeah, first of all, I think that UHF seems pretty unlikely. So just to give a bit of background, in RFID, there are multiple standards, right? There's low frequency, high frequency, and ultra high frequency. What you'll kind of see is ultra high frequency are used can be read over kilometers of distance, right? You can have a tag being read from across the street, because that's kind of what's used in, like, if you go to a clothing store and when your clothes are kind of walked out with or stuff like that, right? And that could be used to read across the table. But the problem here is that the cards that are being used are, like I said, for vicinity cards, which is high frequency. And you can't really read tags at different frequencies, and especially not from a watch that small. That's probably not even possible. Right.
Yeah. I think that that's important to understand, because even if we were using UHF, what needs to be understood is that you'll get a lot of noise. So you have to understand how many UIDs or unique IDs are actually broadcasting at this table at once, right? There's 52 in the cards. And then you also just have the interference of the other 9 or 10 readers or whatever at the table that are causing a problem. So, if you think of it as like, it is a radio wave. So if you think of it as a band, it's going to expand as it goes out in nature, right? It's not linear where you could just like aim it from Robbi to Garrett or Robbi to Rip or anything along those lines. It's going to cascade out in a field, and that field is going to be, it's going to be very noisy. So you have to think about precision whenever we're talking about these types of techniques, right? It's all about getting perfect information in a precise manner and in a very short order of time. So the last one I want to speak about, the last leading, and if anything is occurring, I think that this is obviously the most probable, especially after talking about like what it would take in order to do the infrared scam, or basically be able to breach any of the technology. And that's the idea of just an inside job, right? That's largely what we saw with the Postle scenario. Whether he acted alone or was in part with Justin Curitis or one of the other members of Stones, what we know for sure is that he had access. So he had access to the server room in some capacity. Whether someone else was involved or not, we don't know. But that led to it effectively being an inside job, because where this whole system is most vulnerable is if your server is not protected. And I'll let you speak about this too, but when the cards are read, that information is then sent to the server in an encrypted manner, right? It's not like you could just pull the packets out of the air at that point and just know that seat 1 has the ace of spades type of thing, right? It goes encrypted, the server decrypts them, and then spits out graphics for the people to put on screen. If you had somebody working with you, they would just then be able to relay that perfect information, right? So basically this all just comes down to accessibility of real-time info and making the system as trustless as possible. Can you talk a little bit about the vulnerabilities around the trust involved in running the system and how having an inside person could potentially lead to a cheating scandal?
Yeah, I think, to me, I really don't know if there was cheating going on here or not. I don't even want to make any assumptions because we don't have all the information, and I think their investigation will know that. But if I were to kind of look at all the possible ways to do this, and if I had to design my own way to kind of figure out how to get data here, this would probably be the most likely situation, right? And it's what we saw with Postle, where you have someone sitting in the back who's typing in the bets, typing in the stuff, and they can see the cards in real time. They're the only people who can see it. And there are two big flaws there, right? Either that one person could be working with them. That's something we just can't figure out without knowing the team and knowing Hochstetler. But the other side could be that even without them knowing, there's a flaw in the system, right? Either that computer's footage after post-production, after showing the overlays, has been sent over the network, or either there's been a Trojan kind of installed in that system. And kind of what we saw with the whole Bryn situation where people were talking about TeamViewer. You can have a software like TeamViewer that's set up without anyone noticing, that's sharing the screen and sharing every single card back to some other player. and all you need for that is either access directly to the computer or to just send a virus over to be installed on that computer. So that would be a more likely way of kind of accessing that data, and there's no way just by doing investigations like this we could kind of figure that out. You'd have to be there, and I think Hochstetler's kind of doing the right steps now to bring on a cybersecurity team to figure that out.
Yeah, I think that that's a pretty accurate depiction. Basically what we want to try to get to is the point of making the system as trustless as possible, or at least having a lot of protection at the point of trust, ensuring that we have methods that we can then double check thereafter the fact to see if they've been breached. Do you, from a software or hardware standpoint, do you see any easy solutions to this sort of vulnerability?
Yeah, and I don't want to kind of turn this into an advertisement or anything, but I think that's kind of what we've been focused on from day one in a way, right? And I think the biggest thing is the action tracker itself. If you look at the system that we're building now, right, the way we solve this problem is by making everything integrated. You have the computer is mounted underneath the table. That's wired directly to the RFID readers. The cameras are directly connected to the computer as well. And the entire stream and all that data is collected on the computer locally and only sent out after the delay. Now, we can't really do that with the current manually tracked systems because you need someone to manually type in the bets. The best you can do is have it wired into another room and just hope that no one's kind of bypassing that connection, right? And that itself should be very secure, but I think you kind of brought it up last time, right? And I'm happy Andrew kind of went and removed that feature where you can go and remotely connect, but you still have the ability as a commentator to remotely connect. And there's a lot of other ways, right? Through NDI cameras, I saw someone's thread on Twitter kind of bringing that up, where you can connect the cameras over the network. That's not really an issue, but it does allow a path to go and connect to the computers, right? So I think that overall there's kind of a lot of issues with having a system where everything has separate moving parts and you're designing it for every single thing. I think by having the entire system in one location, all wired, and none of that data even available, like our next system we're planning to do is actually make it so until the hand is over, it's actually disconnected from the Wi-Fi. And once the hand ends, it connects through Ethernet, not through Wi-Fi, but it connects to the network, sends that data, sends the live stream footage, and then switches it off during the next hand. And it just does it every hand. It just sends the data out. And that way you don't have to worry about any kind of these vulnerabilities.
Yeah, my understanding is that there are companies that are currently doing this. I think PokerStars, and then who are you working with Party Poker, Melissa? Sharehand, yeah. I believe that the way their systems are set up is very similar, where everything is then put together in the cloud. So the graphics don't actually appear until a beat later, and you're pulling it from cloud data at that point rather than real time.
Yeah, that's definitely doable, but I think majority of card rooms that are kind of doing this today, they can't afford that kind of setup for that system, and it's way too much over. And that itself has a lot of security things you have to worry about, right? I think like what PokerGo hired, I think it's called Final Table. You can look this up online. It's a whole company built to design this technology for PokerGo Studio, right?
Yep.
And they've been able to do that because they have a full dedicated engineering team to do that. I don't think places like Hustler or even the majority of the smaller card rooms that I've seen running these streams don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah, 100%. So that's, we bring up Stars and we bring up Sharehand, but like these are major companies that are building custom, right? And that's why we always spoke to the fact that like custom greater than out of the box, because it can be really streamlined to your needs, and specifically when those needs are security, that can take a big onus. I guess one last question with regard to what you said, using RFID chips and eliminating the action tracker. What exactly about the action tracker is vulnerable? Because my understanding was the action tracker, so the person actually tracking the action gets no info. They don't see cards, they just see who's been dealt in, and then they actually track the action via discussing with the dealer, hearing the dealer talk, whatever, and then that information sent out encrypted back to the server. So where's the breach?
Tracker, that's ideally how it should work. I don't think that's how it works right now, because they actually show the cards to the action tracker to make sure that at the end of the hands the cards are read correctly. That's why a lot of the times you'll see a card's not read, but then they'll add it in later after checking the intent to see.
So I can correct you a little bit on that. That's actually not true. What happens is if a card is red, it's blue. And if a card or a player's hand is not red, it's just gray. So what's happening is two-way communication between the person doing the action tracking and the dealer, where they can say like, player two's cards are not being read. Can you rub them over the whatever? But they actually never do get that info. However, as I'm speaking out loud, I do understand why you pointed this out. It's because what happened in Stones was the person tracking the action was in the same room as the server, so they could just see, right? They didn't have to communicate with the dealer.
I know that GFN, and I'm guessing Hustler, a lot of these places probably switch this off, but what I've seen in some card rooms use is there's a feature where you can go in, if the card's not read correctly, you can get a list that shows each antenna and what cards are being read, and you can go and see, okay, there seems to be a 5 of clubs near antenna 7, let me go put that on seat 7. So that is a possibility. I'm sure that there's a way to turn it off or put a passcode or something like that. I don't know the full inner workings of GFX. I just think that it's a bad way to handle that in general.
I would have to reconfirm that, because to my knowledge, it's not that specific. It's just that something's missing. But you could be correct in that he was trying to be helpful to the person tracking the action. Obviously, it's
either way. I think the overlays are also kind of input on there. Now I don't know if the overlays are shown after the 15 minutes, or they can see the overlays kind of showing up live. Because I know the extractors also have the ability to hide and show the overlays if something's going wrong. So
yes, yeah. When you're saying the overlays, you mean like the VPIP percentage, the raise first in, that type of stuff.
The cards as well. It's all one system.
He's saying the graphics.
Yeah.
Oh, the graphical
graphics.
overlay.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I see. Yeah, that usually is the production team, right? So whoever's handling the actual stream broadcast itself is pulling that from the server. So this is something slightly different, but also a point of vulnerability potentially. If they're doing that in real time, then that's another whole team that has real time info, right? So even if nobody's in the in the server room, if you have your production, because this is how we do it, we do no delay, obviously. So production gets everything real time. They're getting the information from the server in real time in graphical form, and if any one of them are breached, obviously they could just communicate that to whoever. And
and I think the data from the table to the computer is the other side, right? Where that's always going to be happening in real time in the location. And that's something that people have kind of missed out on, a possible scenario, right? Where the information coming from those readers into the computer, it's even if it's just showing if a card's there or not, it's showing the actual values because there's no computer in the table. Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. Two other things that I guess you could shine a little light on. First being network vulnerabilities. This is an area that I've kind of been beating my chest about or beating the drum on a little bit over the last few days, where I think it's incredibly critical that there are cyber teams in place to handle network securities. And I think oftentimes in these stream houses, either they don't exist at all because the room is very small, or it's a scenario like Hochstetler where they're just entrusting that to the casino to oversee. Can you talk a little bit about the network's involvement and why the vulnerabilities are a problem?
Yeah, here are my kind of thoughts on that, right? There's one side of it is that if you were to cheat, you would need a lot of experts to kind of come and take advantage of the network. So that ends up being one of the hardest things to attack, but that is also one of the hardest things for card rooms to make sure they're getting right? Because that's the one thing that GFX has no control of. No systems like that right now where you have full control of the network unless you're building it for that specific room. I'll kind of give you an example where if you walk into a card room, some places will use the action tracking system on the same internet line, same routers as the rest of the room. Some places will have a separate internet line. Some places will just have separate routers and modems, but they're used as a gateway. There's just a million different factors that could be taking place, and each of these nodes in the system ends up being a vulnerability. And if I were someone who's trying to come and take advantage of that, you can easily access the packets and the data that are being routed either from the table to the production computer, or from the production computer to the delayed computer, or even from that to the stream. There's just a million different situations where this could be happening. And on top of that, if you add, I think GFX has the ability to show and control from a tablet. I know a lot of card rooms do that. A lot of the poker tours where they come and make traveling live streaming setups end up doing that, where you have a tablet which is wirelessly connected and you can go and mark things. Obviously, you can't see the cards directly in there, but if data is being passed to there, there's always the possibility that there is a way to access that data en route to that in real time. Yeah, and I do want to be clear that some of this would require a pretty high level of sophistication on the cheating side of things, and that's what's allowing us to basically feel pretty comfortable operating as is. But we have to also acknowledge as a community that the more that we incentivize this cheating, because there's more at risk, and having perfect information is just worth so fucking much. The more we need to be critical from the security side and not just do simple things that kind of pass the optics test of getting better. And I guess that's the one of the final things that I kind of want to end on. I'll lead in with this, but I really want to get your thoughts on like what protocols stream houses can put into place moving forward. But prior to that, can you give me your thoughts on wands and metal detectors as far as security measures go? I think it's funny your kind of response to that, and especially the Garrett written across the wands. Sure. But I mean, it obviously it can kind of help ensure that there's no metallic devices or RFID enabled devices on themselves. But then again, like kind of going to your last point, right? I don't think it's any easier to build a water bottle that can read the cards than it is to just write a Trojan horse that's installed on the computer in the back room, right? Or some way to kind of connect to the network in between. Now, obviously, I don't know how Hustler works, but I would just go to a smaller card room that isn't worrying about any of this stuff and go through that rather than building a water bottle and doing this whole sophisticated scenario. So yeah, the wands are just, I think, more of a public thing than the publicity thing than a actual security measure. But honestly, any steps to go in the right direction helps. Yeah, I'm a little bit less forgiving. I think that these, I worry when I see these public acts taking place because it distracts us from the things that really need to be changed, which is a lot of the back-end security, all of the vulnerable points that we were talking about along the way with the network, with the server itself. There are many points of vulnerability throughout these systems as they're created. And as we spoke, most people who start stream houses,
I think I want my money
they
back.
kind of just assume it's an out-of-the-box solution that's already secure, and they only look at it at a surface level. So I get nervous when I see nonsense like wanding, and also I just know how this works. Like you get lax with it, right? So you're going to wand me on my way in. I'm going to go take a piss and not get wanded on the way back or something of that nature. It's it's a lot of theatrics in my opinion. It doesn't really prevent anything. If all the person really needs is to be signaled and everything else is happening on the back end or through a third party who's able to get real information and then signal you, you can certainly find non-metallic things that will do that. Bone conducting headphones or microchipped headphones, whatever. There are plenty of things that can surpass this system. And it just seems like a lot of nonsense to me. So let's let you leave on this. From your opinion as somebody who is working and creating these systems, who's heavily invested in the success of these streaming card rooms, and a poker advocate yourself, what, from a secure standpoint, specifically on the back end, what protocols can be implemented for stream houses to become safer? And then what protocols, in your opinion, from an IT standpoint, can be implemented to handle any scenarios like this where there may be a breach in place?
Yeah, I think for the card room specifically, I think that it should be, at this point, if you have already invested in one of these systems, I think it's your duty to kind of go back and talk to the manufacturers, the creators of the cards, the people who set up your network, people who set up the table, and kind of figure out every single aspect of how it works, right? Where are the leaks, and kind of ask them all the right questions. I think a lot of these manufacturers are going to start changing their process and start talking to these card rooms, and I think there should be a protocol on, hey, what standard are you using for your network? Are you using any wireless networks? Is there any place from the AT&T line all the way to the cards where there's a wireless network being taken place, right? I think that's the first step, and I think that's just something simple that everyone can do. The reason why I kind of first wrote out the article and put it out there was because I think that players should also be made aware of this, because the players should go back, and if you regularly play on one of these live streams, you should be asking the production team to look into this and make sure that they're doing their duty to figure that out. On the IT side and the computers and the system side, I think, obviously, I'm kind of biased because we have our own system, but I'm always going to push for having an integrated system. I've probably said the word 100 times during this whole thing, but yeah. I think that it's very, very hard to build a system without vulnerabilities if you don't own it from the card all the way to the software, all the way to the stream. If you have full control of all these parts and you put that in the hands of the company building it and not in the hands of the card room, it ends up being easier for the players, easier for the card rooms to trust, and I think that pushes the game forward, because people won't be going around thinking, hey, could it be this, could it be this? If a situation like this happened, they would immediately go to the company that created it and said, where are all the security flaws and how could this be possible, and how can you update all of your tables, not just one or two setups? Yeah, I think that's very critical. Yeah, and I guess it's not very fair for me to ask you like what they should do if a potential threat occurs as far as like shutting down the stream and things of that nature. That's a lot more on the production side of things, and maybe a question for somebody like Maury. But really appreciate your insight on all of this. If you guys haven't already, go ahead and read Maanit's article today. I think that he does a great job of summarizing all of these issues that we face and why it's important that we pay attention to it while we are. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you so much. Where can people find you on social? Yeah, you can just see on Twitter, Manet M30, or look up RF Labs, RF Poker. But yeah, thank you guys. I think it's great the work you guys and Joe Ingram, everyone's kind of doing in the community to kind of go and investigate and do your own diligence. I think it's important. And with all the RFID information you have now, we're actually hiring. So we have a job for you, Berkey, if you're ever looking for one.
Honestly, man, there was somebody in chat who said that they wanted to work with you, so maybe they'll hit you up. Yeah, you might have to. Awesome. You might have to go back through and scroll. You have employees here. Yeah, no, really appreciate the work that you're doing. I'll not that I want to work for you, but I will talk to you on the side. I have some ideas that I'd like to kick around. I've kind of spoken with Andrew as well. I think that there's meat on the bone and there's a need to be filled that I think both of your expertise could come in handy. On that note, though, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much, guys. If you haven't already, give Manet a follow. Check out RF Labs. That's his new software and hardware that he's launching as far as Poker RFID goes. We appreciate you so much. Thank you,
Thanks,
Manet. Thanks, Manet.
Thanks.
See you later.